Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Tech Tuesday. I have Bruce Lederman.
Lederman.
Huh?
Bruce Lederman.
Lederman. I don't know why I'm just, sometimes this happens, right? Who is the CEO of the Charles E. Smith community in the Washington, D.C. area. We're going to be talking about tech and senior living, all sorts of great things. But first, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Okay, I want to start by, actually, I have a question I'm going to ask before I want to get to your passion, because I'm just really curious about this. So you started out as an attorney, but not just an attorney, a litigator before you ever moved into the senior living world. What did you learn as an attorney and a litigator that helps you in senior living?
Well, Steve, your research, you are right on the attorney part, but I was not a litigator. But I was licensed in the state of Illinois, where I'm from. I will tell you this, my law school experience really did help set my stage in senior living with regards to understanding how to approach the regulatory structure, having respect for our partners in that space. I think you know that early in my career, I was a licensed nursing home administrator. The skilled nursing space obviously is the most regulated in the senior living spectrum. And so that really prepared me well, I think, with regards to the regulatory framework that exists within that part of senior living.
Terrific. So tell me about sort of what you're doing now, what your passion is. Tell me a little bit about your community.
Love to talk about our community. This is our 116th year of serving older adults in the DMV, as we call it, the District of Columbia, Northern Virginia, and here we are in suburban Maryland in Montgomery County. We're located on 36 acres just outside the Washington, D.C. border in Montgomery County, as I said, straddling both North Bethesda and Rockville, Maryland, where we serve up to 1,200 older adults on our campus. We do operate the largest skilled nursing center in the state. But in addition to that, we have 500 units of senior living in apartments, 250 units in an affordable senior living apartment building, and 250 units in what we call a market rate senior living building. But we also offer assisted living on our campus and memory care. And in addition to all of that, we wrap around with private duty home care, both for those who have chosen to live on campus, but also for those who live in the larger community. One of the things our customers like about Charles E. Smith is that we're a rental model. So unlike a life plan community, really individuals can move into campus, whether they need independent living or they're looking for an assisted living lifestyle or post-acute care in our skilled nursing center.
Cool. That is terrific. And you're obviously very focused on tech. I understand you once said that too much of what was happening was tech looking for a solution. Do you think that's gotten better?
I do actually. I do actually. I think there's a lot of great tech that's being offered to older adults today. I mean, we can look at it through a lot of different lenses, right? We can look at it from the consumer perspective, older adults, also other stakeholders, their families, people who love them and their friends. We have the lens we can look at from an operator point of view. And then, let's not forget other stakeholders like the regulators, because they're also quite interested in how tech allows them to be able to perform their functions as well.
So talk to me a little bit about what tech you're using, how you're using it. Areas, of course, I'm particularly interested in digging into with you a little bit are AI.
Right.
We're a big AI user at Foresight. I'm also interested in robots. When robots first started coming on the scene, 10, 12 years ago, I really thought they'd become pervasive in senior living, and that certainly is not the case. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and what you're using and what you're looking forward to.
Okay, well, let's start with what we're doing, and I'd like to focus on AI actually, because I think, well, one, it's so prevalent in the news that everyone's sort of wondering about what does that mean in the senior living space. And I can't find a better example than the story that appeared in the New York Times last week, and that was about Jan Worrell, an older adult. She's 86 years old, living in a remote part of Washington State, has family and friends around the country, but no one close, drives, engages in a lot of activities, but she lives by herself. And she has what was described as, I think inaccurately, as a robot. In fact, it is an AI device that sits on top of a table in one of her living spaces, but it's highly engaging. And I think that article really revealed something about the role of AI and social connection, not a replacement, but in an adjunct to our daily lives, that asked a lot of questions. And I think brought to the readers of the article, and I think there were well over 1,000 comments, um, asking really profound questions about how AI fits into the future of aging. And as you know, Steve, with the oldest boomers turning 80 this year, our generation is focused more than ever on what our aging experience will be like.
So the AI companion is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and I'll sort of give you two data points for me that are very personal. You probably remember it's been maybe 10 years since the robotic cats came out,
Right.
and I remember being at a Mary Furlong conference, and Ted Fisher, who was running the company, I think still involved with it, that had these robotic cats, and he was up on the stage and talking about them, and I thought, those are so creepy. And then I did a little interview with him, and he put one in my lap, and it was really nice. I was really surprised about how much I liked it, about how realistic it felt in my lap. Found myself sitting there petting this robot, and I thought, maybe there's something here. Then a few months ago, I drove down to Southern California and I wanted to research something. So I fired up ChatGPT on my phone and I started having a conversation with it. And it felt like I was talking to a human, and part of me really liked it, and part of me found it again really creepy, scary. So how do we balance all that?
Well, I think one is transparency, right? I think that you need to be upfront with the consumer and explain from the get-go, this is a device, it is a tool. It may appear to resemble human behavior, but it is not a human being. You asked earlier about, Bruce, give me an example of some tech that you're deploying on campus. And one example is that are replacing our voice of the customer survey vendor with an AI-based vendor. So it used to be that people on campus or their families would receive a phone call from a live person who would really just go through a list of questions. Do you feel safe there? Do you like the meals? How is the dining service? And so on and so forth until they finish their questions. They are obviously being paid on the number of questions they can ask, get it done as quickly as possible. They're paid per survey. We're now shifting to an AI tool. And I think the beauty of what Memo Made is going to offer is that it's a dialogue. The AI tool will announce when it makes the phone call that it is not a person. The person is free to hang up. Person is free to reveal their name, or it can answer anonymously. And the AI tool, instead of simply asking questions, the questions are beginning of a conversation. So if, for instance, a resident said, yeah, my dining service was really good, the AI tool is going to follow up, really? Is there anyone that you particularly want to note who made it a very pleasant experience for you? Well, the live person doesn't have the time to ask those questions, but the AI tool is going to be able to extract more information about how we're exceeding the customer experience or how we're failing, and in what ways can we perform better in order to live out our mission more fully.
So I am completely enthralled by this. I actually just signed up for a trial for a service that does a very similar thing. I don't know whether I'm going to use it or not, but I've been thinking that I could use it to get sentiment from various senior living leaders. I'll tell you the other thing that would be really interesting to explore with that, Bruce, and that's collecting stories about how you're having impacting people's lives. Because one of the things that we know in the industry is we are terrible about collecting those stories and telling them. The hardest part is collecting them. You can find people to tell them if you can get them.
Right. Well, we are very fortunate. 2.5, 3 years ago, one of our donors and now a board member, who's, by the way, whose great grandmother was one of our original founders, gave us initiated an innovation fund here at our organization in memory of her father and mother, who are of blessed memory. And with that innovation fund, we've been able to retain a vice president of innovation and strategy. And we will do those wraparound studies as we proceed with integrating new technologies, but not just technologies. We tend to focus on tech, but of course, innovation can mean many different things. I won't get into it. Maybe I'll come back to sometime, Steve, and we can talk about our journey as we launch Teepa Snow's positive approach to care at Charles C. Smith Life Communities, and what we hope to achieve with introducing her approach. But getting back to your earlier point, I agree with you. We need to capture those stories. We need to explain them better to the public. And of course, now that we live in an era of AI, being able to promote those stories is capital. It's requisite to be in today's marketplace.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I just before we went on the air, I had a call with one of the leaders at a senior living organization about doing a keynote for their leadership team, and we spent a lot of time talking about how can we collect these stories of changed lives that team members are involved in, tell those stories, celebrate those stories, and it's an area that I'm really, really passionate about. I think it's how we make people, the public, fall in love with senior living, because right now what's mostly out, the stories that mostly get out there are the negative stories, right?
Well, I'll gently push back about that. I think there are a lot of great stories that are promoted about the option of living in a communal setting as you age. I want to highlight my colleagues up the coast. It was not so long ago, a few weeks ago, that there was a water main break in an independent and assisted living residence. And I think it was due to ultra cold weather. And gosh darn it, those associates who work there, they got that building evacuated as quickly as possible. And that's an extreme example. Yeah. But day in and day out, there are tens of thousands of associates working in our residences across the country who are really committed to lifting up the older adults they serve. I'm not saying that there isn't room for improvement, but especially as you look at our faith-based providers, which we of course are proudly one, you're talking about lay leaders serving on boards and associates who choose to work in faith-based communities in order to bring our mission to life and lift up the lives of older adults, to create communities where, agency doesn't stop because you move into a senior living residence. It's only the beginning of being able to explore what is that next project I have that I want to accomplish.
Yep. Yeah. So don't get me wrong. I think that there are way, way more positive stories and tiny numbers. The problem is that when you talk about the public media, they tend to focus on the little ones, right? And so my focus is getting all these massive stories that never see the light of day and figuring out how to get those stories out there. So I 100% agree with you. So we've talked primarily about this survey tool. When you look at technology and workforce, how do you see that playing?
I think we need to think about, as we think about our workforce, we look at it as a bunch of concentric circles, right? So the residents, those we serve, are at the center of all that we do. And those closest to them, we don't like to use the term front line here. We talk about people who work, our associates who work at point of care or point of service. And then we have, of course, managers outside of that. And then there's executives. And then, of course, there's our board and our lay leaders who serve in governance roles. So let's talk about, for a second, what tech means for our point of care and point of service associates, but also then when it means for the other parts of the organization that are another layer out. In some ways, it can be very simple, but yet quite profound. I'll give you an example. So now in our skilled nursing center, the machines that take blood pressure and the machines that do weights, those automatically transcribe the blood pressure and the weight into the electronic health record. So the associate isn't running around with like a little pad of paper and little notes and, and then going back and typing it into some some panel, but rather it's really taken care of for them. It seems like a small thing, but when you think about everyone that you serve and the fact that this data needs to be maintained on a regular basis, this adds up. I mean, there's a great example about sort of hidden technology that's really quite profound in some ways, and yet really simple in concept in another, right? But then you think about let's take a step back, another use of artificial intelligence. When hospitals are ready to discharge today, they're issuing basically on a platform, on an electronic platform, they're saying, hey, Mrs. Smith is now ready for discharge. Well, skilled nursing centers now are utilizing AI in order to go through all of the medical record in a fraction of the time, in order to determine, do we have the skill set? Are we the type of location where she can thrive? And so there's a great example away from direct resident care, away from direct point of service, but yet technology, of course, is offering an invaluable edge, an additive skill set.
Yeah, I love that example, and I think that not only can you use it to determine whether they're a fit, but it then becomes a powerful tool for creating an optimal care plan, right?
Totally. I mean, better understanding the resident even before they come in, so that you can better understand, especially in those first 72 hours, especially for a post-acute care resident, right, whose average length of stay, depending on where you are in the country, is anywhere from 12 to, let's say, 24, 28 days. So the time is of the essence, right? Yeah. In those first few days, you really need to understand, who is this resident? How are we going to be able to provide the services in order to promote their successful launch once their length of stay is over?
Perfect. So I gotta come back to robots. Are you using robots? Do you have thoughts on robots?
Okay.
Because they to me it feels like they're not being utilized the way they could be, but I may be missing something.
No, I think so. I think first of all, we need to take out of our head like a humanoid, like we see Boston Dynamics and these. So we need to take that out of our head. I think we are a long way away from having a humanoid robot that we would trust with a live person transferring them from bed to a wheelchair, from wheelchair to a toilet. Okay, that's a long way off. But let's talk about, I think, what we're seeing more often in the workplace. You go to a major airport today in the United States, late at night, it's not unusual to see a robot that's washing the floors. And of course, this robot is a very large sort of box on wheels that has, sort of a Zambini, if you will, thinking of our Olympic conversation, and it's cleaning the floors. And of course, you're going into some hospitals, and we'll talk about the North America and the United States in particular. And I think you are seeing more robotic devices being used, perhaps in environmental services, perhaps for delivery as well. I think in the senior living space, obviously, I used acute care examples there. The most similar is the skilled nursing environment. We're still a ways away in order to be able to deploy that kind of technology. keep in mind, the average age of a nursing home residence in the United States is about 50 years of age. So you're dealing with very old buildings compared to the typical hospital in the
Yeah.
United States. So you're talking about a lot of infrastructure need for that robot to do what they're doing
Yeah.
that isn't necessarily translate. I know some of the larger regional, let's take a step back. I'm sorry, I'll continue on this.
No, keep
theme.
going. This
Okay.
is fine. This is good.
I know, for instance, that some of the larger national and regional companies, let's say, have done studies about robotic vacuums, vacuuming the hallways, the long corridors in their buildings. And there's a lot of studies being done on this. Is it creating better margin? Basically, what's the ROI? It's amazing. When I spoke specifically to a robot vendor on this vacuum issue, there is a lot of mapping. There is a lot that is going in to make that successful on a regular basis. It's not just plug and play. So I have a bit of a wait and see attitude.
Okay.
But I will throw one tech out there, and I was just discussing this with our VP of Innovation yesterday. I am surprised that we're not seeing more in the way of exoskeletons in the senior living space. I see in the construction world, you're seeing more and more introduction of these basically frames that a person puts on, and it allows them greater strength.
Yeah.
And when you think about those working at point of care, our geriatric nursing assistants, our nurses, our private duty aides, and the incidence of workplace injury, you would think you would see more solutions around that. And I'm not even talking about, let's throw in informal caregivers, right? The families and friends of older adults who are not paid, who are providing hundreds of thousands of hours of personal care to older adults in America every single year.
Yeah. Yeah. No question about it. So you mentioned earlier that with the first boomers are hitting 80, and I'm not quite at 80 yet because I'm right smack in the middle of the boomer generation.
Okay.
How do you think the boomers are going to impact, are going to change the senior living business?
Well, I'm at the tail end of our generation, Steve. So I salute all the members of our generation who are ahead of me. I was too young to get to Woodstock, but I do remember the moon landing. I think we are called the me generation for a reason. Okay, I think when that headline appeared in the mid '70s, I think it stuck. And no disrespect to our parents' generation, right? Many of whom were the first ones to settle suburbs in America, right? They were the ones who went from apartment living, the war, into suburbia, and happened to live at a specific golden moment. Perhaps in retrospect, it looks golden.
Yeah.
While it was going on, it was real life. And I think for us, the story may be apocryphal, but Governor Brown in California in like 1959, 1960, looked at the demographics and said to the head of the California university system, looks like we better build a lot of dorms because it just saw the numbers. And here we are. We have been used to a certain reality of the world sort of forming around our collective size. And we're still, 72, 74 million strong. It's a big cohort. The millennials, of course, have 80 million, but it's really the two of us are a large generation.
Yeah.
So I think that we're going to see providers in this space really focusing on promoting a sense of agency. It's not about programming. It is about creating the space where organically, just like we did through our lives, we want to be able to direct where we're going. Okay. And I think that's a theme about our generation, is the sense of agency, that the definition of who we needed to be, we basically changed.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I'm not sure I really thought about it in quite that frame, but I have a fair number of residents who are readers, watchers of Foresight, and as you were saying that, I was sort of thinking, and I just got an email this morning from a resident, and it had sort of a long list of things they were unhappy about in their particular community. But if you were to distill them all down to one thing, and this person was probably not a boomer, but they would be bumping up against a boomer, is that it was a lack of agency. All of the complaints were ultimately right there,
Right.
and it should be the natural thing we do, right?
Look, what was it, about 5, 6 years ago that the concept of continuing care retirement communities was rebranded as life plan communities?
Yep.
I mean, that was done with an eye towards us, right?
Yep. Yep.
Continuing care retirement community, it sounds, I'm falling asleep as I'm saying it, but a life plan community, well, okay, let's talk about my life and let's make a
Yeah.
plan and let's work on it. That sounds like something that where I'm in the director's chair. I'm not sitting in the back of the bus and someone else is driving it.
Yeah, exactly right. I've got two areas I want to touch on. We're running short on time here.
Okay.
But you have a home care agency, and frankly, most operators see home as the enemy. And as I understand it, you don't.
Right.
Talk to me about that.
Well, we've been around 116 years, Steve, and actually our foundational story was a gentleman, Hyman Goldman, who saw an older adult sitting on what was described as a bread box, and he was crying. And he went up, he said, "Why are you crying?" And the gentleman said, "Well, my son has died, and my daughter-in-law has thrown me out of the house, and I have no place to go." And so the germ of our core of our story was addressing those who are unhoused, okay, and were older adults. Our mission is not about everyone living on our campus. Our mission is to lift up older adults to create meaningful life experiences. Well, not everyone is meant to live in a congregate care setting. Some people really want to live in their homes for the remainder of their lives. So the question then for our expression of mission is, well, then don't we have a responsibility to be present in a way that the consumer wants us to be present? Again, the sense of agency, right? So that we are an option that is as viable for you if you're living in your home as it is here on campus. And an extension of that is, as we roll out a positive approach to care, we're doing it both in terms of training our associates and our families on campus. We will also be doing the similar type of training for those who choose to receive services at home.
Oh man, I love this so much. What if we, and I think that I mean, it sounds like you're already doing this, but what if every senior living organization said, we're here to serve older people, to give them their best lives, whatever that looks like, rather than saying we're only going to give them the best life if they move into our building, right? It would be amazing.
Well, I do want to, again, I want to reach out to, especially to my colleagues in other faith-based communities, because there are just amazing leaders out there whose teams are just living their faith every day and doing exactly what I just described that we're doing here. They're doing it other campuses and organizations around the country.
So, one last question. A lot of conversation about the middle market, and I would even say middle market and lower. I know that if somebody's completely indigent, their nursing homes are kind of the senior living, senior housing of last resort, not always the best one. Any thoughts on middle market and where we go with that?
Steve, I would love to have a conversation with you about the intersection between senior living and financial realities in the United States, because we really could go on. But the issue of the middle market is critical today. A lot of mm, private equity firms, large organizations, they understand where the margin is, and they're pursuing luxury and upper tier housing for older adults. It is much more difficult to execute in the middle market. And we are actually converting one of our 250 unit apartment buildings to serve that market now. It's a 30-year-old property where we'll be spending a nice sum of money in order to reposition the building to serve what a consumer wants today. I am encouraged that there may be some changes coming down the pike that will make it more affordable to convert buildings, but also develop new properties. And it's a whole other conversation into serving the middle market, older adult population.
Yeah, we'll have to save that and do this again. So when you look at Charles E. Smith, what's your vision for it in the next 5-10 years?
Well, I believe that we need to continue to pursue what I had said before, and that is how are we going to lift up, older adults in their communal settings. I think we do want to explore affordable housing. We do it quite well, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for us. And in addition, our private duty home care business, which we're now, we had a partner and now it's a full-time gig for us. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to expand. And then I'd also like to see us explore other opportunities, perhaps managing other businesses as other communities as we continue into the next century of our journey.
Terrific. And I have one question I should have asked you earlier, but I'll finish with this because hopefully it's short. What's some technology that still needs to be invented, or some problem that technology should be solving but is not?
Great question. And my first answer is we need to create data lakes instead of data silos. A lot of people out there have a lot of great systems, but the data is trapped in each individual product. And the ability to extract that data so that we can understand those we serve better. And I think a lot of consumers experience this. You have a watch, you've got a different monitor, another monitor, but what is all the data together? What does it really mean? I think this issue about creating data lakes, that is a holy grail I'd like to see some tech person pursue.
I agree with you 100%. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us. Any last words?
Just thank you, and thank you to your listeners for sharing their time with us today. Loved your questions, and feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. And Steve, until we meet again.
Great. Thank you very much. And Jada, thank you for being in the background and producing the show.